welcome to another episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got David Bowman. What's up, man?
Hey, Bill. How you doing?
Pretty good. So I heard your story. You have a real interesting story. I want to know, when did you start getting involved with that type of life?
Well, pretty much when I moved out to Las Vegas with my mom and dad and my older brother. After my folks left, that's pretty much when it started. I was, 16, 17 years old.
So what was your first experience with these guys, or how did you get introduced to all of them?
Well, I started, like I said, after, my parents left and it was just me and my older brother. And then he left a few months later. It started a blow out in Las Vegas. And I met a friend of mine at the apartment that I was living at, and we kind of went into business. And back in those days, it was a lot different than doing it now. Let's put it that way, because Las Vegas was a lot smaller. I mean, you think of Las Vegas as it is now, but back in those days, I mean, it was maybe 100,000 people, and you could drive from one end of the strip to downtown, within an hour. You could go 2 blocks in an hour now. So, but that's how it started. And then I met the Hole in the Wall gang. Was the summer of 1980. It was June of the first week in June. As a matter of fact, Gene Smith had just shot Frankie Bluestein in front of Sunrise Villas. That had just happened right when me and my friend got into town, just to kind of set the timeline there.
Yeah. So was it good interaction meeting them when you first got introduced to them?
The actual very first night, no, it was scary as hell, and I'll tell you why. It was because Jerry Costanza's brother, Nicky Jr. and Nick Costanza, who doesn't get mentioned a lot, but Frank married Nick Costanza's daughter Elaine, and Jerry Costanza and I were pretty tight. And when you read my book, Bringing Down Colada, the story Casino Couldn't Tell You, I'll get into that. And that's basically how I got in with the Hole in the Wall gang, was through the Costanza family. I knew Elaine before Frank did, and Jerry and Nicky. And what had happened was Nicky had gotten murdered a few months before, and they found him in the trunk of his car. He was a dealer at the Tropicana. And I don't know, Frank told me when I met him in 2019 who did it, and it nearly floored me. And I mean, I didn't know the guy, but I guess Frank knew all along, was my point, because he played like he didn't know back in those days. But now when I found out the truth in August of 2019, it blew my mind, because those guys basically kind of cornered us and surrounded me and my friend and pumped us for information. Well, they wanted to see if we knew anything, and that's just how those guys are, And
this is before you knew them, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had just rolled up. I mean, we hadn't seen any of them. I hadn't seen Jerry since Nicky had been killed, and we had just spoken to Elaine on the phone, and she told us to go, that Jerry was working as a chef down at the restaurant, and that's where he was, and to go meet him. And she gave us the address, because we had never been there, before. And she had told us that they were affiliated with, who they were affiliated with, which was Tony and Frank.
Did you know about them? Did you know about Tony and Frank?
Yeah, I mean, if you had a pulse back in 77, 78, 79, 80, it was all over the news pretty much, every week in some facet or another. It was something about Frank Rosenthal or, something about Tony Spilatro. And there was really nothing about Frank that had been in the news because, he hadn't gotten in trouble. But anyway, like I said, that's when we met him. It was the first week in June. And we had come into town. We had done a little criminal thing in Colorado and didn't turn out well for us. I mean, we didn't get in trouble or anything, but we didn't get the money. And so we just rolled into town. We were hurting for cash. And so my friend, he began working at the restaurant at the Upper Crust. And he took over for Jerry almost immediately.
Yeah, the guy that got killed.
No, that was his younger brother that got killed.
Oh.
Was Nicky? Yeah, that was Jerry's younger brother. Was Nicky Jr. And he was the dealer at the Tropicana. And I believe they caught him cheating or suspected him of cheating or trying to, steal from the hotel. And at that time, it was being run by the Kansas City family. And they found out and he got a car right out in the desert, and they found him in the trunk of his car. And that's, it really shook me up when I heard about it. We heard about it. We were in Colorado. And it really did. I'll never forget it. I mean, it really, it was a kind of a weird time in my life because I knew that we had just been with him and we went horseback riding, as a matter of fact, in Bonnie Springs with a couple of other friends.
So do you start feeling like I don't know who to trust? You don't know?
Well, it was a wake-up call to just how deadly and serious things get out there. And even back, in those days, and probably even more so now. But, when you mess around in that environment, sooner or later it gets you, in one form or another. And it got Nicky, and it really did. It shook me and my friend up pretty good. And we kind of looked at things differently after that. And then all of a sudden we go into town, and then we didn't even know until we had got into Vegas that Jerry and Elaine and all of them and Nick were involved with Tony and Frank. I mean, we had known these people for 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden they've, they go down to the Upper Crust, and that's who's running the place. And so we just fell right in with them. After that first, confrontation where they pumped us to see if we knew anything about what happened to Nicky, then everything was cool after that. And like I said, the Costanzas basically co-signed me in because I was young. I mean, I was 19 years old when I got involved with them.
What was your first dealings with them?
Pardon me?
Like your first, did they have you do anything like, oh, we're going to go do this first burglary? Because they did a lot of them, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I met them, that's when they were at their peak. I mean, that summer, I'm telling you, Bill, it was unbelievable. It really was. I always look back and say that summer of 1980 was magical and kind of crazy at the same time,
Yeah.
But yeah, they were doing shit all the time. But again, I was young, and I was was very mature for my age. I had older brothers. My parents were older. I just carried myself older, and I was very respectful of older people. I respected my elders, and I knew who these people were. I didn't act afraid of them, but I showed them respect, and I was quiet, and I spoke when I was spoken to, and and they could see I was sharp, and Jerry had co-signed me with them, and he had known me for 2 or 3 years prior. So I set up a score for him. I don't know, it was probably 2 or 3 weeks after we had met him. And it was this was the one where they got caught. Okay. Well, no, they didn't get caught. They almost got caught. They went over. It was a guy that I had sold blow to, and we knew that the guy had a safe in his house, and because we had actually tried him before, and that's how we discovered it. And so we thought this guy would be perfect for the hole in the wall gang, and so that's what I told him. And so I took a car ride one day with Nick, Costanza, and Ernie, and we took it, and I showed him the house, and I told him, you know, he got alarms put in after, you know, we had hit him a couple of years ago, and so I said, so just be aware of this. And I said, and he had a bunch of antennas on top of his house, and it was right across from Vegas Valley High School, and so. I don't know, it was probably a week or so later. I was sitting in my apartment with Jerry and Joe Tassoni, and the news on, you know, 11 o'clock news. And at the top of the news was potential hostage situation at such and such. And they give the address on Vegas Valley Drive.
Yeah.
And I knew the address, and I just looked at Jerry, and we just like looked at each other like, what the fuck? And then immediately I freaked out because I thought, oh my God, you know, they think they're going to think I set them up, or I don't know what the fuck happened. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so Jerry immediately went down to the restaurant, and they got away, but the neighbors saw them tie, they didn't get the drapes pulled in time because they posed as police officers. Okay, Ernie and Leo, who basically were the hole in the wall gang, by the way. I mean, they always show the photo of them, you know, the Bertha's crew, but that was really, there was 3 guys added on to that, but Frank and Ernie and Leo were basically the core of the hole in the wall gang, and then guys like me or Joe Blasco or Wayne Matecki or, you know, whoever. I mean, there were lots of people who were members of the hole in the wall gang for a score or two, you know?
Yeah.
And that's just how it was. I did a couple with them, and this, like the one I'm describing, is one of them. But anyway, the neighbors saw them overpower the guy after they got in, and they called 911. But Frank heard the call because he had the scanner, and he heard the call go off. So he walkie-talkied Ernie and Leo and said, "Get out of there." And they actually ran up the street to this guy's house that they actually knew, and hid out there until Frank could come and get them. But I mean, the place was with police. But I mean, my main concern was they weren't pissed at me. Okay.
Yeah.
That was my main concern, was everything.
Yeah. Like blame you for the reason why they got caught.
because those guys do shit like that, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, you know, the fucking kid's bad luck. Let's kill him. You know, he didn't really do anything, but I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking. But
so you're like, you're on edge at that time. You're like, damn, I don't know if these guys are.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I saw the newscast, I mean, I freaked. I was like looking at Jerry. I said, "Man, you got to let them guys know." I said, "I don't know what." He says, "You know, calm down." He says, "I don't know what happened, but that's, you know, what actually did happen." So everything was cool. And then the second one was the big one, because that kind of changed the whole dynamic of Las Vegas, really, because this score that I gave them was this Cuban drug dealer, who's a Quaalude dealer. His name was Ernesto. I don't even know what his last name was. I'd never met the guy in my life. It was a friend of mine's dealer, basically. And he told me about him, and I said, "Well, hell, Tommy, let's get a hold of the boys, and we'll go take that shit." And so
Would
that's what
they
we
ever
did.
do it while would they do it while the people were home, or would they always wait until they were gone?
Yes. Well, yeah. Like the first one I gave him, the guy was there. Uh, because I told them that the house was all alarmed up, so they figured it was better to try a different approach. I told them the guy wasn't anything, he wasn't some big hulking dude that you're gonna, have a problem with.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did. They flashed badges, and as soon as the guy opened the door, then Ernie, who was a bull. I mean, Ernie was built like a freaking tank. And Leo wasn't nothing, Leo was a solid dude too. I mean, these guys were solid men.
Yeah.
And so they overpowered the guy and were going to tie him up and probably would have killed him.
They would have bring guns too with them, right? When they would do these robberies, they would bring guns with them.
I'm sure they did. And they asked me if I wanted to, Ernie asked me if I wanted to work with him. Because Ernie and I got along really good. We partied together, and him and Jerry Costanza became really pretty close. And since Jerry and I were pretty close, then that's how we all kind of formed our own little kind of subdivision of the whole gang. It really was.
Yeah, like a little branch of it, right?
Yeah. And that's what we were. But, I like to think of me and my friend Tassoni and Jerry as we were smart enough to stay a distance from these people because we knew how hot they were. I mean, we'd get high and talk about it. And I got on my soapbox one night and I told him, I says, I mean, if we're not going to make money with these guys, hell, it's we're already hot now. I mean, as soon as we rolled into town, Jerry asked me and Joe, he says, "Are you guys hot?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Well, you are now." It was true, because as soon as you pulled up in the parking lot of that upper crust pizzeria there in the Pioneer Plaza, and then Tony's Bar, my place, was right next door. They was actually had a hole in the wall, pardon the pun, where you could pass food and stuff through to the from the restaurant to the bar.
Yeah.
So you pull up in that parking lot, and the FBI and Metro had your license plate and your picture hanging up on the wall the next day. So
would you see them? Would you see them parked in the car and doing surveillance?
Practically every night, because we had tables set up out front, like patio tables, with the umbrellas, and there was 2 or 3. But I mean, I would sit out and have a beer and smoke cigarettes and shit. I would see them, we'd actually sometimes wave at them, just to let them know we knew. And it was really it was intense. And then it got even more intense as time went on. Now I was at the story of when I gave him the second score.
Yeah.
We participated in it. We sat on the guy. He was went to a restaurant that he always went to, and we knew his car, so we sat by a phone booth, made sure he didn't leave the restaurant bar. If he did, then we would call his apartment, and Ernie would pick it up, and then I'd tell him to leave because he was leaving the restaurant. But everything went smooth. They went in, they got the dope, and we didn't know how much they got initially. And this is where the whole rub began, was Frank lied to Jerry Costanza, who him and I were like, like I said, he brought me in. And so, but Jerry didn't like Frank. Okay. He felt Frank wasn't doing enough, including him in on things, and he wanted a bigger role. And he didn't like the fact that Frank was at that time dating his sister. And he flat ass told me he didn't like him. And so there was a definite rub between him and Collada right from the get. And
and of course they're gonna lie about how much money they're making off the scores. They're not gonna say the truth.
Well, yeah, Frank. Well, let me tell you, Ernie wouldn't, because Ernie ended up telling us after Frank lied to Jerry initially, he told him they got like an ounce of blow and 1,000 quaaludes, I think is what he told Jerry. Because he wanted it is what it was, because he had started doing it. And, you know, once you start doing that shit, it got a hold of everybody. Everybody was doing it every day, you know,
Yeah.
as much as they could. Let's put it that way.